Hey everyone, this is Russell. Welcome back to mission number 2. Should you choose to accept it, we're going to be focusing today on story and story selling and the Epiphany Bridge and a whole bunch of amazing things on how you can get people to buy your products and your services. And if you've ever struggled up to this point, like, how do I get people to actually give me money or to click on my ads or do these things? A lot of times what you're struggling with is your actual story. And the story is what gets people in a state where they actually come to you and actually buy something. Now, if you want to go deeper on this topic, I recommend make sure you get a copy of the Expert Secrets book. Make sure you read it. I spend 4 or 5 chapters going deep onto story and how to tell a story and the story structure. I'm going to go over a lot of stuff right now, but if you want to go deeper, make sure you get a copy of the Expert Secrets book. I'm assuming you probably have it at this point, but if you don't, get it and read the sections on story, because it's really the key to persuasion. Every step in the funnel, from the ad to the landing page to the sales page, the upsell pages, all we're doing is telling stories in a very specific way. Okay? And the good news about this is not complicated. It's not something to stress out about. It's actually really, really simple. In fact, for most people, they're already overcomplicating it, and I'm going to strip it back and make it more and more simple. Okay? And so to do that, I'm going to kind of sketch out a couple concepts that'll help you guys. So if you look at whenever you're selling something, the biggest key for you is to go back in time and figure out, like, when was it that you got sold on the concept, right? If you're selling a product or service or whatever, like, what was the thing that sold you? Okay, I always think about this whenever I'm selling how to make money or business or whatever, funnels, things like that. I always think back about, if you've read the .com Secrets intro, remember when I was like 12 years old, I started collecting junk mail, and I started getting so much junk mail in the mail every day that the mailman couldn't fit it in the mailbox. So he'd give me the junk, he'd like knock on the door, give my parents the junk mail. I get home from elementary school and I'd open these sales letters. I'd take my big stack of junk mail, I'd go to my room and I'd start reading the sales letters. And there were some sales letters I'd read and I'd be like, I'm boring. Read another, I'm boring. And some I'd read and I'd be like, oh my gosh, I need to get my parents to give me their credit card. And I'd go and beg my parents for their credit card, right? So for me, I'm always going back to that time, like, what was the thing, like, what would get Russell excited? What got me excited? Like, why was I excited about this topic, this thing, right? So the first step in telling good stories, you have to go back in time and remember when you were a normal human being, okay? So I have to remember before I got excited about funnels. Like, what was happening? And for you, it's like whatever your business is. Some of you guys are into weight loss, finance, physical product. Everyone's got a different thing you're selling, right? And so think about, like, when your life was normal, before you got your superpower, before you became obsessed with this thing that you do, right? So what was that thing, okay? And so go back in that time. Like, when was it? Was it when you were in high school? Was it when you were younger? Like, what was the thing that happened? And then when you remember, like, what was the experience? Something happened to you that took you out from being a normal human being. Like, I remember, like, when I was a kid, I was like I'd come home from school every day. I would get a bowl of Rice Krispies and I'd sit and watch cartoons for 2 hours while I was eating Rice Krispies. And then when cartoons got done, my parents would call me in and we'd go have dinner and then I'd go to bed. Like, that was my life until I started wrestling. So in my wrestling world, like, what was the thing that, like, what was it that got me off the couch eating Rice Krispies or Cheerios and got me into wrestling? And I still remember the experience, like, vividly. For me, the experience that happened was, my dad forced me to go to wrestling practices. He was a wrestler, so he forced me to go. I went going, and I didn't like it. I was okay, but I wasn't that good. And then this one match, it was my freshman year, and I'd been like 3rd or 4th string, and finally I beat the JV guy, which meant I was junior varsity. I was second string, and I got invited to go to this tournament. I came to wait in the tournament at my high school, and the kid that I'm wrestling, he comes out and he has a mustache, like a legit mustache. I'm still to this day can't grow a mustache. I'm hoping someday I can. But I remember, like, I was so scared. I'm like, I'm wrestling a guy with a mustache, and went up to the after Wayne's, went up to the basketball court. They put wrestling mats down, and we had the tournament. And I remember looking in the stands. It was like my mom and dad and nobody else in the stands. That was about it. I walk out to wrestle this guy, shake his hands. I'm looking at this mustache, and I'm like, I'm in big trouble. And we start wrestling, right? So we're going through this thing. We're wrestling, and somehow at the end of the match, I end up winning. And I remember standing up and looking at this guy with this look in my eyes, just like, oh my gosh, like, I can't believe I beat this guy. Has a mustache. And I beat him. I shook his hand. The ref raises my hand. I look at my parents. My dad's jumping around like crazy. And like that day, I became a wrestler. Like that day, I was like, I had this experience. And I was like, nothing else matters. I'm not going to do basketball or video games or TV. Like, I just want to wrestle. And for the next, like 20 years of my life, that's all I did, right? And so that was my experience in wrestling, where, like, I shifted from being a normal human being to, like, I'm a wrestler, right? For me in business, it was the same thing. Like, I was a normal kid, and all of a sudden something happened to me that got me excited about business, about funnels. And so for you, you gotta remember, like, what was that thing that happened? Okay, and after that thing happened, you had to have this emotional experience. It took you on this journey, right? And I call this the Epiphany Bridge. So you had this epiphany I'm gonna be a wrestler. Funnels are amazing. You have whatever that thing is. Or you have this big epiphany, like, oh, this is awesome. And then you go on this journey where you are obsessed with it, right? And you geek out on it and you love it. And so you come over here on the end of this journey, and here's you. I'm gonna put glasses on you now because what's been happening for the last 2 years, you've been geeking out, like studying and learning and like nerding out and like figuring out all the concepts and the terms and everything. Like now I'm in wrestling, I'm talking about hooks and angles and like directional things and single legs, double legs, high cross, like all this stuff for wrestling, right? Or in funnel world, I'm like talking about analytics, split testing, all those different things, right? All the geeky stuff. And so what happens is the worst thing on earth is we start getting this thing, we call it techno babble, right? Where we just like know everything. Okay, and now we decide that we're gonna come and we're gonna change people's lives because like this changed our life. I want to change people's lives. So we go and we find this little like customer who's walking along the street and they're like normal and happy. And the first thing we do is we come and we jump out there and we're like, how's it going? And here's you with your glasses on. And you all of a sudden you start spewing out all this technobabble on them. And the person's like, oh, and they get all freaked out and then they leave, right? Because you scare them. Okay, you have to understand that technobabble was not the thing that sold you, right? This isn't what got you all excited, all the technical things behind it. Like later, after you had this life-changing experience, you had this epiphany, you came over here, and then you learned the technobabble, you geeked out, but the technobabble is not how you sell people. It's the worst possible thing you could do. Nothing like will repel customers faster than you talking in technobabble, okay? And so this is where most people struggle. And so I see it in your sales videos and your Facebook Lives and your podcasts where you're going through the technobabble, trying to explain technically how these things work. And your audience's eyes are glazing over and you're losing them. Okay? If you really want to have an impact on people, you have to remember what was it that got you to start this journey? Okay? Something emotional happened. They came over here, and so this is what started you on the journey. And then over here, you logically convince yourself that it's amazing. Okay? So emotion, people buy things emotionally and they justify things logically, right? Like for example, let's say you went to the car lot and you see like your dream car, you see a Ferrari and you're like visualizing it and you're like, oh my gosh, this thing's amazing. You sit and you're like, can you feel that? And you rev the engine, you feel it and you're like, I have to have this car. And so you go and you finance your house, you finance everything, you buy the car, you drive it home and your wife's like, dude, why would you buy a Ferrari? And you're like, well, honey, you understand, like it gets really good gas mileage. And you start logically trying to convince her of this thing, right? That's what we do as humans because we emotionally buy things and we logically try to convince ourselves and others why we did it. But if you're trying to sell somebody something, logic will not ever sell somebody something. It's the emotional experience that gets them to buy. So you have to get back and start telling these stories to give people the same emotional experience that you had. Okay? That's the big secret. That's the big aha. And so, a good example of this, when the second Funnel Hacking Live, we had Marcus Lemonis, who is the guy, if you guys have seen the TV show The Prophet, he was our keynote speaker. And so we set up ahead of time because I was like, I want to hang out with Marcus because he's like the coolest person ever. So he was speaking, but I said, I need 30 minutes ahead of time to talk to Marcus about whatever. So before he got on stage, we had this time, we sat in a room, and he was out walking the halls and saw like the event. And if you guys have come to Funnel Hacking Live, you know it's like, it's a party, like people are going crazy. And anyway, he came to the event and he's like, what's happening out there? I'm like, oh, it's our event. And he's like, I thought you guys are a website builder. I'm like, yeah, we build funnels, but it's similar. And he's like, then why is everyone so excited out there? He's like, I don't get it. And so for me, I was like, instantly like, I gotta explain to him what a funnel is. And so I'm like, well, and I start explaining like, a funnel is cool because you can have like upsells and downsells and you can like, you're split testing and I start spewing out this techno babble, right? And almost instantly I see Marcus's eyes glaze over. And I'm like, oh crap, I'm losing him. What do I do? What do I do? And I was like, why am I excited about funnels? And I was like, oh, and I switched back here. And I remember like what got me excited. I said, you know what? And I told him my story, like when I first got started in business, I started talking about my potato gun and how it worked and how the whole thing failed. And I figured out upsells and downsells. And then when that happened, then all of a sudden like it opened the whole world to me. And I had this epiphany and then I started doing funnels in all sorts of industries and businesses. And eventually we did it. And I explained the whole thing. I explained my Epiphany Bridge story about how I got excited about funnels. And Marcus is like, oh my gosh. And he's like, well, how would a funnel work for this kind of business? And I'm like, well, I would do this. He's like, what about this business? I'm like, this. And I explained 4 or 5 businesses and he goes, huh. He's like, every business needs a funnel. Okay, did you hear that? He said it. He had the epiphany. I told him my story. My job's not to say, and Marcus, the big epiphany I had was this. Because then it's like, if I give him the epiphany, it doesn't mean anything. He has to experience the epiphany. So I'm telling him my story about this journey I went on and what I found at the end of it. And then if I do it right, he's going to have the epiphany like, oh my gosh, I need a funnel. Oh my gosh, the secret is ketosis. If that's what I need to do, actually lose weight. Oh my gosh, I need a financial planner. Oh, I need to get my back adjusted. Like whatever your thing is, right? I need to have them have the epiphany of like, oh my gosh, that's the big secret, right? And so that's the game. That's what story's all about, right? It's not about logically trying to convince people of things. It's coming back and remembering the story that got you excited. Okay, so I want you guys to go back in time. Like, why are you so excited about your topic? The thing that you sell, what got you so excited about that? You need to remember and get yourself in a state where you can like go back and actually tell that story, and then you're gonna tell that story, and that's what gets people excited, okay? You give them the epiphany, then they'll go geek out, right? After Marcus had the big epiphany, then he's like, every business needs a funnel. And I was like, yeah, it does. And he said, do you want to be on the show? I'm like, yes, I do. And then he went and started geeking out and started telling his team about it, and like, got everyone on board for us to come and build funnels, okay? But it wasn't because I logically convinced him, it's because he had the same epiphany. Okay, so for you, it's the same thing. And so, and again, this is why I think you should go deep. Like, read the Expert Secrets book. We go into story structure a lot deeper. Because one of the big things is like, it's a concept I call state control. State control. Okay? When I'm telling the story, it gives me a chance to control their state. I need to get them to feel the same way I felt when I was experiencing this. If I just like, oh yeah, I built a funnel, I sold potato guns, and it was awesome. If I tell them that, like, they're not going to have the epiphany, right? I need to control their state. A good story will control the state of the listener who's there. It forces them to feel what you felt when you were there. You can think about in movies. In film, we see this all the time, right? When you're sitting there, you're watching a movie, and you see the character, you see their eyes, you see the environment, you see all this stuff happening, and because of that, you're able to feel what's happening, right? But for most of us, we're not producing full-length videos with Hollywood budgets and stuff, and so I have to be able to tell the story in a way that gets people to feel. Okay? Like when I was telling you guys the story earlier about my wrestling, like I didn't just like, oh, I wrestled this guy, he had a mustache and I won and it was awesome. I started talking about like, I shook his hand and I was nervous. I saw my parents in the stand and I was so excited, and then I started wrestling, I was freaked out, and then I got done. He lifted my hand, I got it raised, I saw my dad jumping around the stands. I'm like, and I tell you that also, you put yourself in that same experience, right? And you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, and now all of a sudden you had the epiphany with me, you felt that with me, right? And so the better you get at stories, the better you're gonna be at controlling the state of the person listening, so they can have the actual epiphany you need them to have. Okay. Now again, at first when you do this, you're gonna suck. Okay. That's why we have you committed to publishing every day for the next year, because every time you do this, you can get better and better and better. You're testing your material, right? First time I tell this thing, it didn't really land. Second time I tell, it didn't really land. Third time it's like, oh, part of that landed. Like I saw them having the aha moment, but they got confused over here. I used too much technobabble. Let me clean it up. Let me tell the story again. And so you keep telling these stories over and over and over again until you start mastering, until you start getting rid of your technobabble. These stories, you're able to control the state of the person listening to get them to have the epiphany. And this is what the goal, like this is what I'm trying to become better at, is becoming a better storyteller. Okay? Because if I can tell a good story and have somebody have the epiphany, I don't have to sell them anything. People always say, Russell, you're an amazing salesperson. I'm not that good of a salesperson. Okay, all I'm gonna do is telling a story, they get somebody have an epiphany, and then I just tell them like, this is, like you should geek out too, buy my thing, you can geek out with me, because this is like the most exciting thing on planet Earth, right? And so that's what story is, you guys. So what I want you guys doing is I want you guys practicing this, okay? In fact, tomorrow we're gonna be going into actually your origin story. So I want you thinking back in time and like, what was the reason why you got excited about whatever it is you're excited about? If you're into funnels, if you're into weight loss, if you're into financial planning, if you're into dentistry, chiropractic, if you're a financial planner, if you're a videographer, you run an agency, like whatever it is, like what was the thing that got you excited about this thing that you're doing? And I want you to make sure there's no technobabble. Start thinking through this, okay? Because tomorrow we're gonna start breaking it down, and you're actually gonna be publishing your origin story, your first story on whatever platform you picked yesterday, okay? So that's the key. Now, a couple things for your homework is hopefully you have the Expert Secrets book. If not, I'm going to put some of these resources in here as well. But if you go to page 123 in the Expert Secrets book, like I said, I will put some of these pictures in here as well. Actually, if you go back to page 114, this is the Epiphany Bridge script. So telling the story is one thing, but like, how do you break it down? Like, what's the actual process of how to tell a good Epiphany Bridge story? Okay, there's a journey you take people on, and I'm not going to go too deep into it right now, but we'll put. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I will post in the members area. Funnel Hacking Live, I gave a presentation where I explained the kind of Epiphany Bridge story, so you can hear it again, because repetition is a big part of learning. I'll have you watch that again, and then inside there, I actually share the Epiphany Bridge script from page 114. I show it like how do you tell the backstory, the wall, the epiphany, the plan, the conflict, the achievement, the transformation. Like I'll walk you through the story arc that we use for our stories, and then after that, I'll share with you the actual questions. So if you're trying to figure out like, how do I tell the story? I've never told the story, I'm confused. There's a bunch of questions. So if I was to ask you for your origin story, these are the questions I would ask you. Let's say I'm interviewing you, try to get your Epiphany Bridge story. I'd say, hey, so-and-so, so tell me your backstory. What's the backstory that gives me an invested interest in your journey? you're like, oh, well, the backstory is, and you can tell me the backstory, right? And then it's like, what was it you were trying to accomplish when you kind of went on this journey? Okay, what was the external struggle you're dealing with? What's the internal? And then what was the wall or the problem you hit when you were trying to figure this thing out? And what was the epiphany you had that made you like understand the thing? And then what was the plan you created that took you on this road? And what was the conflict you experienced along the way? What was the achievement you had at the beginning, at the end, and the transformation? Okay, so this is like the story of how we go. So I'm not going to reteach this right now because I think it'd be more efficient if you watch the presentation from Hacking Live. But it's going to go through this whole story arc and how you can actually tell your stories. And you notice that this story plot line is in all major movies. All major books are following the same storyline. So it's good for you and me to start mastering this, become better and better and better at doing it. In fact, some of you guys know Kaylin Poland, who runs Lady Boss Weight Loss. She did something interesting too when she was trying to get other people's stories, because after a while you may run out of your own stories. You're trying to find other stories, or you want to find stories that are going to affect a different audience. And so what she started doing is she started interviewing her customers who are having success. And she said, if you look at Kaylin, like she appeals to like a certain demographic, right? People that relate to her, but there's other demographics that might not relate to her as much. Same thing's true with me, same thing will be true with you, right? Like the person who's like, typically people who are in business suits who have been in business 50 years of their life don't relate to me nearly as much as like the younger people who are like trying to figure out like how to change the world, have a big impact, right? Like there's different audiences that will connect with different people. And so for Kaylin, she was like, the audience segment I'm missing right now is moms, because at the time she didn't have any kids, right? So she's like, I don't have any kids, I need some moms. So she found a bunch of her success stories who are moms, and then she said, hey, I want to interview you on Facebook Live, and I would tell a story. So she had those people basically come through the Epiphany Bridge script on page 123, and she had them fill out a form answering these questions. Like, number one, what's your backstory? Number two, what was it you were trying to accomplish? What was your external, your internal desire? What was the wall? What was the epiphany, the plan, the conflict, achievement, transformation? Had them fill out a whole form answering all those questions, okay, like writing their Epiphany Bridge story for her. Then she had it, and then she interviewed each person, and the person would tell this story, and she's able to get the Epiphany Bridge from that. Okay, so if you're doing a podcast or doing an interview show, this is a great way to interview someone who you're interviewing, is to get them to tell their story, how they had the epiphany for whatever they did, right? If you're trying to tell your own story about something, it's the same thing. The questions will lead you through how to tell the Epiphany Bridge story the right way. Okay, so that's the goal. That's the homework for tonight. I want you guys to go and watch that next video to go deep into story and start thinking about. I want you to understand what was your origin story. Okay, that's what we're focusing on tomorrow. Is your origin story. Okay, what was that? What was the thing initially that got you excited about what it is you're going to do? Because that's going to be your very first blog post for my writers. It's going to be your first podcast episode for the audio people. It's going to be your first Facebook Live for those who are doing Facebook Live. So it'll be fun. That's the game plan. Do your homework. Geek out on the story stuff. Print out the story structure. Have it. Like I print these all the time. I've got my Epiphany Bridge script. I've got the Epiphany, like the longer form, the story arc here. I've got the questions. Like I print these things out all the time. You guys are doing the same thing. Like when I'm doing my stories, a lot of times I'll sit down and be like, okay, there's the script I got to follow. Here's the question. So if I get stuck, I'm like, what do I say? Oh, my backstory. Okay, so number one, guys, let me tell you the backstory how I got started. And I'll tell the story, and I'll be like, okay, the thing I wanted to accomplish was da-da-da. And I can just look at these really quick as notes as I'm telling my story. Okay. And so, in fact, I will show you guys tomorrow. I'll show you guys an example of me doing my origin story, following the script to a T, so you can see exactly how it works. Does that sound like fun? All right, that's the game plan. You guys do your homework, and I'll see you tomorrow.